Hi students, it's Dr. Z back. The last time I was with you, we talked about life cycles, right? We talked about the life cycle of butterflies. And I'd like this time to talk to you about another kind of life cycle. It's not animal, it's not plant, it's not fish. In fact, it's invisible. Something that's actually living that we can't see, but is very important to us, as we'll figure out as we go into this. Well, maybe you've guessed what I'm going to be talking to you about are bacteria. And another name for bacteria are germs. Don't you love it? Yep. Bacteria, that's a wonderful one of those scientific words, and they're also called germs. Now, bacteria are really, really, really small, okay? In fact, they're so small that you can't see them with your eyes. Scientists use very special instruments called microscopes to be able to see these little critters. And we're actually going to be doing an experiment where hopefully we can actually see the bacteria. Now, the good news is there are lots of good bacteria around. And of course, the bad news is there are some bad ones. But again, the good news is there's a lot more good ones around than there are bad ones. And bacteria are really everywhere, absolutely everywhere. They're on our skin, in our hair, inside of our bodies. They're on animals, they're on our clothing, they're in our house, they're in our food. They're in everything we drink. They're in the oceans and the fresh water, and they're in plants and trees. They're everywhere around the world, just everywhere, okay? Now, I said that there were both good and bad bacteria, and as I said, luckily there are a lot more good ones than bad ones. And the good ones, for example, actually live inside of our bodies and help digest our food. So when you eat stuff and it goes into your stomach, those good bacteria can work in there to help get the energy out of the food. Also, we use bacteria to make food, like bread. I don't know if you've heard the word yeast. Well, yeast is a bacteria, and yeast is what makes our bread nice and airy and soft. If we didn't have yeast, our breads would be really kind of hard and dense and not so pleasant. Cheese, if you like cheese, bacteria are used to make cheese too, and wine and beer. So bacteria are really important in our lives, and of course it can be bad too, because bacteria can sometimes make us sick. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those bacteria are really like, and how we can grow some bacteria so that we can actually see them, and what we can do to protect ourselves from those bad bacteria. So, you know, I said, I told you that bacteria are really, really, really small, okay? And guess what? If I had a little bacteria here, and I had another one, and I put 1,000 of them in a row, okay? 1,000 bacteria in a row, you know what? They would be as small as this spatula. They would hide behind that spatula. They were that small. So I can put 1,000 bacteria on the edge of this spatula, okay? End to end in a row. And they're so small that they would hide behind there. Isn't that amazing? That's really kind of hard to understand. But here's what we're going to do. There is a way that we can actually grow bacteria, and in that way we're going to make so many of them that we're going to be able to actually see them. And we're going to do this in a way that's going to help us understand where bacteria are all around us, in our house and in our bodies, and also will help us a little bit understand how we can protect ourselves from those bad bacteria. Okay, I also have a picture here, and this is an interesting one, of what actually bacteria, if you had a really good microscope, and you know what a microscope is, it's something that scientists use to be able to look at and study very small things, right? And these are some pictures of actual different types of bacteria. And remember, there are thousands and thousands of different kinds of bacteria, okay? So some of them look like little circles. Some of them look like worms, okay? And some of them look like little packets. All kinds of interesting sizes and shapes that these bacteria, and each one of those has been named by scientists, and some of them we know are good and help us, and some of them are not so good. So this is what scientists do. Biologists is the name for people that do this kind of work, scientists, and of course doctors are very interested in bacteria because they can make us sick. Okay, so we're gonna try to actually grow some bacteria now. You hear the airplanes behind me. I live pretty near Dulles Airport, so they're always going over. Anyway, we're going to do an experiment, you and I together, and hopefully we're going to actually be able to see these bacteria. Now here's the thing. Remember in the life cycle, like in the butterfly, the mother butterfly flies around, lands on a milkweed plant, and lays some eggs, and those eggs hatched to the caterpillar, caterpillar to the chrysalis, chrysalis back to the butterfly, and then the butterfly again laid more eggs. Now, the life cycle of bacteria are very, very different. They don't lay eggs. They do something much more interesting, actually. And let me try to show that to you right now. Now I'm going to ask you to really put on your thinking caps. This is a little hard, okay? A little hard to understand, but you can do it. And let's try to do this together, all right? So, the question is, and let me get the camera down here a little bit, okay? The question for us is, how do bacteria grow? This word is bacteria, grow. How do bacteria grow? Well, let's start off with this little bacteria here, just one little bacteria, all right? It's kind of got a little smiley face there, Maybe if I get this a little closer, it would be easier for you to see. Okay, so we have a little smiley face there. And this little guy can actually take in food, right? And he takes in this food and he turns it into energy. And at a certain time, he's ready to I'm trying to get this light right for us. Okay, let me get this out of the way. Okay. There was a spot there, okay? All right, so here's our little bacteria, and he's eating some food, and when the time is right, he's going to actually split in two. Can you believe that? The bacteria actually splits in two and now becomes two bacteria. And so he disappears, right? But where we had one before, now we have two. So those two bacteria now, and we call these, by the way, we call them bacteria cells. That's an interesting word, huh? C-E-L-L. These are called cells. So before we had one, now we have two. And those two eat, and then when the time comes, each one of those splits in two, and they disappear. And now we have four. So in a little bit of time, we went from one, now we have four. And those four cells, bacteria cells, they keep eating, okay? And then each one of them divides in two, and they disappear. And now, guess what? We have 8. We used to have 1, now suddenly we have 8. So all 8 of those continue to eat, right? And when the time comes, guess what? Each one of those guys splits into 2. And so where we had 8 before, now all of a sudden we have 16 of them. Can you imagine how this is going? And this is happening like maybe every 12 minutes. So let's keep following this. Those 16, every one of those now divides into 2, and suddenly we grow from 16, now we have 32. And then in 12 more minutes, each one of those 32 split in 2, and now we have 64. And then every one of those split into 2, and now we have 128 bacteria, and every one of those splits, and suddenly we now have, and can you believe I drew all those little circles? Now we have 256 bacteria. And this just keeps going on and on and on. And you can imagine, after not too long a time, we have millions and millions and millions of bacteria. So, that's how bacteria grow. And it's a pretty amazing thing. From one little bacteria, he divides himself into 2, and each of those divide themselves into 4, and they just keep going and going and going. And pretty soon there are so many of them that you can actually see them with your naked eye, okay? So here's how we're going to do it. I purchased something called a Petri dish, okay? I don't know why they call it a petri dish. It's kind of an interesting name. But this is it. It has a top and a bottom, and they're plastic, okay, and they're clear. Now the bottom has something very interesting on the bottom here. You can see, I'm going to pull this out. Can you see? It almost looks like Jello, right? And it's a coating on the bottom. And believe it or not, this coating is called agar. Another wonderful word, agar. But you know where this agar comes from? You wouldn't believe it. From seaweed. Seaweed are plants that grow in the ocean, under the water. And actually, they're pretty good to eat. I've had seaweed and I really like it. But you can use the seaweed to make the agar, and like I said, it's almost like a Jello-like coating. And we put that in the bottom of the petri dish because guess what? Bacteria love it. So this is their food, okay? So here's what we're going to do. I have here a little cotton swab, okay? And I'm going to, here I have some very clean water here, and I'm going to put the swab in that water here, okay? And now I'm going to go collect some bacteria. And you know where I'm going to collect it from first? I'm going to get it from my computer, okay? This is an iPad, and I'm sure you all have something very similar. And this is the keyboard right down here, and we use that every day. You guys are using this every day for your schooling. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little cotton swab that has some water in it, and I'm going to wash the keys, in between the keys, and actually on the keys, and on here, and I'm going to wash all that all over the place, okay? So what I've done is, there are bacteria on those keys. I've gotten some of them on my cotton swab by passing it over the keys, and I'm going to take now my petri dish with the agar in it, and I'm going to just transfer those bacteria on that agar, okay? So now hopefully we have some bacteria from the keyboard of your computer on that agar. I'm going to put the top back on, right? And I'm going to put this in a nice warm place. Now bacteria like a certain temperature to grow well, and actually our body temperature is the good place to grow, right? So that's why bacteria like to grow in our bodies. But I'm going to let this grow for about 4 or 5 days, and then when I come back, we're going to see if there are actually any bacteria on our keyboard. And then I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to take some of these what they call disinfectant sheets. I'm sure you know all about these, right? They're used for cleaning, and they have some chemicals in them that actually will kill bacteria, right? And then I'm going to take my iPad and I'm going to wash it real well. I won't do it for you as well, but to show you. But you know, I'll clean in between the keys, and I'll wipe off all the keys real good, and make sure it's nice and clean. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to repeat my experiment. I'm going to take a new cotton swab. I'm going to put it in some water, and then again I'm going to rub it over the keyboard. right? And then after I've done that, I will take a new Petri dish, a brand new one, and again, I'm going to put it on the bottom where that auger is. I'm going to transfer whatever I got onto the auger, and then I will put the top on. And so now we're going to have, and I will also put this someplace where it's nice and warm. So we'll have a comparison. This is what scientists do all the time. They like to compare things. So I'm going to be growing bacteria from the iPad as I found it, and then I'm going to be growing bacteria from a nice cleaned up iPad. And we're going to compare them and see if, in fact, cleaning your iPad real good, the keypad real good with one of these cleaners, really does reduce the amount of bacteria that's on the computer pad. Okay, so when I come back next time, I'm going to do some other experiments like that, where we're going to be comparing where bacteria is, and maybe after I clean it, whether we've taken off the bacteria. So when I come back, we'll do some very interesting comparisons, okay? All right, guys, thanks for listening. This was a hard subject, but I hope you'll discuss it more with your teachers. And when I come back, we'll see the result of our experiments, and also I'm going to talk about another kind of non-living bacteria, which are called viruses. And the virus is why we're all at home instead of being at school. But that's another story, and I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for your attention, and keep studying, guys. Bye-bye.